Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Roz Tucker, Managing Director for the Mobility Services Group here at the ARC, and I'm excited to welcome you to our Transportation Demand Management Coordinating Committee meeting for the month of August. The last time we met, we were just starting summer and kicking it off, and now we're ending summer. So I hope that everyone has had a wonderful summer. We've been doing a lot of work in the TDM group here at the ARC. The team and our team of consultants have been working diligently. We started our new fiscal year July 1st, and so we are excited about this third year of our contract with GDOT and all the work that we'll be doing over the next 11 months. I just want to welcome all of you. I will note that the meeting minutes for June 21st were submitted. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes as noted? If not, then the meeting minutes for June 21st, TDMCC meeting will stand as submitted. Jill, do we have any public comment this morning?
Good morning. We do not. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And without further ado, I'm going to move to our next agenda item. We have a regional economic update that will be coming from Mike Carnathan. Mike Carnathan oversees our research division here at the ARC. And I know many of you have had the opportunity to hear the great work that he and his team are doing. And he's going to share with us what's happening in the landscape, and we'll be able to connect the dots to the work that we're doing across the region. So I want to welcome Mike Carnathan.
All right, thanks, Roz. Make sure that I'm doing this right. Give me 1 second. Can everyone still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you, Roz, for the introduction. Yeah, again, my name is Mike Carnathan. I head up the Research and Analytics Group, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time giving you an update of some of the things that we're looking at in the workforce space. As everyone knows, this is a very weird time in our economy. We have all-time high quits rates, which means workers are quitting for greener pastures all the time. We also have, all-time lows in that ratio between unemployed workers and open spots. We have inflation that's going on that's causing wages to rise. And so it's just a very hard time for employers to really kind of understand what's going on out there. And I know that, if the struggles that we have at ARC are noticing and just hiring people, I know that a lot of employers are having that same issue. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all that stuff. And also just give you kind of just an overview of the economy as a whole. But before we do that, I do want to kind of put sort of the growth in metropolitan Atlanta in context. We are a fast-growing place. Many of you have seen me use this slide, and I always bring it back out just to remind you that we are a fast-growing place. And you can't really talk about the workforce, you can't really talk about the economy with at least acknowledging that Metro Atlanta is still, relatively speaking, one of the fastest growing places in America. You'll see here Atlanta is that red line. We added 800,000 people over the last 10 years from 2010 to 2020. And we rank 4th behind Dallas, New York, Houston, which is, relatively speaking, where we have ranked really over the last 30, 40 years.
His slides are advancing.
Uh-oh. Okay. Hold on 1 second.
Sorry, someone's texting.
Okay. Is that better? Okay, yeah, so I can see the screen. So y'all can see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. So you'll see the red line there. That's Metro Atlanta. We added 800,000 people. We ranked 4th. And so all of this is to say is we're still a relatively fast growing place. Now, if you look at the pure numbers game, you'll see that we added 800,000 new residents in the 2010s. Before that, from 2000 to 2010, we added more than 1 million people. In the 1990s, we added about 1.3 million people. So all that means is, yes, we're still relatively a fast-growing place, but overall population growth is slowing, which that's going to put more pressure on our education systems and our workforce systems to attract talent into a kind of, really attract talent from a dwindling pool, because overall population growth is slowing. Now let's take a look at what this looks like kind of locally, where the population is going. You'll see blue filling in everywhere, but you'll see blue particularly filling up north. And this is a pattern that we've had in this region really for the last 3-4 decades, where you see a lot of the jobs and a lot of the people going up north, which does create some challenges for us in terms of that commute. So, workers who live down south are finding it increasingly hard to commute to those jobs up north. Now, of course, teleworking can be a game changer in that respect. Okay, so let's look at the workforce real quick. If you look at just the racial and ethnicity composition of the workforce, it tends to skew, the workforce tends to skew a little white when compared to the composition of the population as a whole, but for the most part, we have pretty good balance there. If you look at the age of the workforce, it's exactly what you would expect. In other words, you look at the current employees, they tend to be a little bit older. And if you look at the new hires, they're skewing towards the younger ages. So that just is just indicative of a nice, healthy churn. And then in terms of educational attainment, the Metro Atlanta's workforce is exactly the same as the composition of the population based on educational attainment. Now here we're going to look at a little bit different. And yes, and I know these slides are really, really, really busy, but what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the race and ethnicity composition by occupation. And any blue bar that sort of extends to the left of the screen, that means that occupation has an overrepresentation of white workers. And then on contrast, if you see any bars that are extending to the right half of the screen, and here we're looking at healthcare support, those are occupations that tend to have an overrepresentation of workers of color. And so you'll see occupations like healthcare support, building grounds and maintenance, transportation, material moving. Those are the occupations that have historically been overrepresented with workers of color, and those are also happen to be occupations with some of the lowest wages in the region. And so that brings up an equity issue that we will talk about later. And then we can do the same thing by occupation by gender. And so you'll see there's got some obvious occupations that skew heavily male, like installation and maintenance and repair, protective services, construction. And then there's some occupations that are overrepresented by women, healthcare support, healthcare practitioners, and legal. Okay, so now we understand what the workforce is. Let's take a real quick look at the economy. And, we're back. And I'm saying this because a lot of metros aren't back, and I'll show you that slide in a little bit. But we actually have about 90,000 more jobs today than we did entering into the pandemic in February 2020. And so if you compare our recovery to a lot of our peer metro recoveries, well, we're doing okay. I mean, Austin and Dallas really are the only large peer metros of ours whose job market has recovered stronger than ours. And then you do see some metros like DC and New York and Boston who are still struggling to catch back up to pre-pandemic levels. And then the nation as a whole, you might have saw this in the news last week, the nation as a whole finally got back to that pre-pandemic level, but Metro Atlanta has been there for most of this year. Now, we can't really talk about any economic indicator without talking about inflation. And this is just a yikes. And so if you look at, and this is June to June, so that's the latest data that we have at the metro area. You'll see Atlanta is, has one of the highest year-over-year inflation rates compared to many of our peer metros. And the reason for that is for a lot of the reasons that I've already explained. Our job market is recovering. That's putting upward pressure on wages. We're still a relatively fast-growing place where we're attracting in-migrants, and because a lot of the in-migration we get are coming from more of these expensive coastal areas like in New York or like in California, people moving here are bidding up prices on things like shelter, and shelter is a major factor of CPI, of inflation, and so that's one of the reasons why inflation is so high here in Metro Atlanta. Now, at the same time, wages, you can't really talk about inflation without talking about wages. And you'll see that since the pandemic, wages in Metro Atlanta have increased threefold when compared to a period before the pandemic. And so that means, again, employers, to attract that talent, are really having to increase pay. All right, so keep it on going. And if you look at the long haul over wages, you'll see that, really at the average earnings per job in Metro Atlanta is really about where it was in 2000. And so, yes, wages have gone up pretty good recently, but over the long haul, if you talking, if you adjust for inflation, workers really haven't gotten a raise in a long, long time. And so you'll see that gap. And so, what you're looking at here is any blob that's facing upward means that the wages are higher in the US than they are in Metro Atlanta. So you'll see this period in the middle here from roughly 90 to about 2005. The average job in Metro Atlanta paid more than the average job in other metro areas. That gave us a competitive advantage to attract workers here. Now that you see that blob has gone back up, in other words, that wages are paying lower here than the average job, we have to struggle a little bit more. We have to fight a little bit harder to get those workers, to attract those workers into metropolitan Atlanta. And that was a point that I talked about at the beginning. And so again, wages are right around, where they were 20 years ago. And a part of this phenomenon is just the simple fact that mid-wage jobs have taken a beating, and they continue to take a beating. This is looking at a 5-year period where here I'm just stratifying 21 occupations into 7 highest paying, 7 mid paying, and 7 low paying. And you see that we've done a great job of attracting high paying jobs. We've done an okay job of attracting low-paying jobs, but it's that middle wage job that's really, we're just taking a beating, and most of it is in this office and admin support bucket. But what that means is, if you're talking about career ladders, if you want people to progress from one of these lowest paying occupations into a higher wage occupation, the numbers are challenging because there's not really those middle wage jobs to step up into. So if you look at what employers are seeking today, well, a lot of it is, software developers and software developers of applications. That's been sort of the most sought after skill, most sought after occupation from employers for years. And in fact, this list doesn't change that much. It's registered nurses, sales reps, truck drivers. So those have been, kind of always in the top 5. But now what we want to do is we want to contrast this with what employers were seeking before the pandemic. And you'll see a number of the same things: software developers, registered nurses. So you don't really see from these visualizations, you don't see much difference, which is why I, kind of subtract it out and see, okay, how has that demand changed? In other words, which occupations are employers seeking more heavily today when compared to the pre-pandemic? And I'll read some of these out to you since the type is so small. It's laborers, so just material movers, laborers. That has changed the most. In other words, employers are seeking that occupation more so today than they were before the pandemic. Truck drivers, sales reps, food prep and serving workers, retail. So all of these that I just read, save the truck drivers, are all among the lowest paying jobs in the region. So our employers are really struggling to find workers. And a lot of it has to do with, just adjusting that pay scale up so they can find the talent that they need to sustain their businesses. All right, so very quickly, I'm just going to go through some of the challenges that we have to kind of better balance this workforce ecosystem. It's really about upward economic mobility. That's an area that Atlanta struggles in. And what you're looking at in this chart, and you'll see Atlanta's right here, an extreme outlier compared to these other metropolitan areas. What this is showing you is that while job growth has been pretty good in Atlanta for this 20-year period, that upward economic mobility, the incomes that children are making today, or the income that adults are making today, when they were born 30 years ago into low-income parents, well, that's just not moving up. And so that means there's something broken. If job growth is not translating into upward economic mobility, well, we have a problem. And so you'll see here in Metro Atlanta, workers of colors are 5 times more likely to be among the working poor. They're also 3 times more likely to have no vehicle. And then you'll see, if you look at where low-income jobs are located in the region versus where low-income households are concentrated, you'll see that there's a big mismatch here, because low-income jobs are everywhere in the region, but we have relatively concentrated pockets of poverty. And that just makes that transportation issue more acute. We also, we understand that lower income workers are less likely to live near transit. And so that's a big issue. And so it all comes back down to access. And it also comes back to just equity. And so one way, especially in the city of Atlanta, that we can look at it is, we can look at high paying jobs where they are, and we can look at access to transit. And again, at least within the city of Atlanta, we see kind of a big mismatch of where access to transit is and where these higher paying jobs are. And it's got a couple more slides and we'll take some questions. And so you kind of add all this up together and you know that, okay, well, city of Atlanta has the highest levels of income inequality by far in the nation for cities. And then Metro Atlanta as a region has one of the lowest rates of upward economic mobility, as I said before. And so those are some of the challenges that we're trying to address in the workforce system. And that in the workforce system, we're talking about training and retraining and skilling and upskilling, but it also includes our public education. So it includes K through 12. It includes technical colleges. It includes our 4-year colleges. And so all of this, all of this activity, all of this energy in that space is really really focusing on these challenges and trying to find answers to that. And so that's my last slide. So Roz, if we have time to take any questions, I'll be happy to do so.
Absolutely. Are there any questions for Mike regarding any of the presentation or any thoughts you might have here? Feel free if you could just, if you're online, if you could unmute yourself, feel free to ask the question, Mike. And if you're not able to unmute or to talk, please feel free to type in the chat box and we will monitor those. Okay, it doesn't sound like we have any questions at the moment.
I have one, Rob.
Oh, okay, we do have a question. So we are hybrid today and we have some folks here in the room, so feel free.
I just had a question. If you could go back to the slide that shows the difference with the access to transit versus the high-paying jobs.
This one? Or no, this one?
Yeah. So what are some of the ways, or are there any outlook or looking at ways of how do we do this connection of better access?
I mean, there's a couple of different ways, and I mean, John Orr is going to be presenting after me, and he's way more qualified to talk about this. But there are long-range plans to expand transit, especially in the city of Atlanta, around the Beltline area. Now, one of the things that we do know is that people who are seeking training or retraining or seeking a certificate to kind of advance their career through federal dollars, transportation is always held up as one of the #1 barriers. And so if you do go through WIOA training, this is the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, and these are federal dollars that come down to the ARC to help train and retrain and upskill workers. You can get transportation vouchers. Those would include things like MARTA passes to help workers who are going through this training to get to their training, and that's an underutilized resource. And so I think when we're talking about using those training dollars, we need to do a better job of marketing those services. But ask John Orr about the transit question. He'll be able to answer better than me.
Thank you so much, Mike. I see a couple questions in the chat here. And this again might be a definition, John, I don't want to just toss this your way, but I see a question from Tom. It says, how is access to transit defined? And so that is one.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually quarter mile to a bus stop and half a mile to a train station. And so, and there's different ways to define it, but that's sort of the traditional way that we define it, as a half mile to some premium transit, which that's, headways of 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes or less. And then a quarter mile to, just kind of regular bus service.
Thank you so much. I see a hand raised. I just can't tell.
I think it's Gil. I believe it's
Okay.
Gil, Roz.
All right, Gil, go right ahead.
So my question is, Mayo saying the obvious, apologize, but you're saying that there might be a connection between, if we improve access to transit for those who do not have a car or things like that, that it would help with the upward mobility in Atlanta, that you seeing any correlation with that? You're saying between access to transit or making transit or more available to everybody and economic upward mobility in a city?
That's the hope, right? I mean, we have to test it out. But yeah, I mean, the access to services, and transportation is a service. For lower income workers, you're removing a barrier, one of many barriers, to that upward economic mobility trajectory. Now, have we been able to, have we had enough time to really test that? Not really, but we do know that, you know, in some of the areas that do have and then have had transit for a long, long time, they don't have the same upward economic mobility challenges that we do. They have their other challenges. Housing affordability is certainly one of them, and that's going to definitely erode the benefits of transit. But that's the hypothesis that we're working on.
Any additional questions for Mike? Thank you so much, Mike. We really do appreciate this great information. And I will say that as we look to the future of TDM in the region, we are utilizing this and other forms of data to inform how we're reaching out to the workers across the region. As you can see, it's really flipped, and we have to take a bigger look at with what Mike is talking about. It really boils down to equity and who we're servicing. And so, you know, some of our focuses that you'll see for the program in this third year, but also into the future with our TDM plan update. I won't get into that. I won't steal Sabrina's thunder, but you'll see a little bit of this coming out in some of the direction that we plan to take. So thank you so much, Mike. And this is a great segue. We have John Orr coming up next. He's here to provide an update on the IIJA. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Did want today, this morning, to provide you an update on some of the work activities associated with the new Transportation Reauthorization Bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Just give you a little bit of overview on some of primarily focusing on the new notices of funding opportunities, along with a few other things. And I do see that David Haynes on the team here at ARC is here, and David, feel free to unmute yourself to elaborate anything you would feel you could add. Okay, well, we'll jump right into it. First of all, I know it is quite a job trying to keep up with funding opportunities that are going to be coming out at the federal level. And the team at ARC worked very hard to develop a resource database and website that you can go and search for funding opportunities that have been released. And that's, Roz, if we have a moment, I may bring up the website just to give everyone a little bit of an overview of that towards the end of the presentation. But we realize that this is very difficult for communities to follow, and others is that what's out there that can help implement transportation projects. So that's a good tool we'll hit on in a minute. Also at ARC, we've been working with Deloitte that is working at ARC for a couple of items, and they're giving us some assistance on how to help organize ourselves in the region to best organize and pursue it, winning applications at the federal level. So moving forward in the future, I'm sure you'll hear more about that effort. Also, we've got a local government working group through the staffs around the region at the Transportation Coordinating Committee that's going to be helping give us some advice moving forward. And then finally, I did want to note about the Connect ATL Summit that's going to be coming up next week on the 23rd over at the Georgia Tech Conference Center. So we're excited to see that. And we'll also have a Connect ATL resource room on the implementation of the new bill in case anyone has questions. So now getting into a couple of important items is that First of all, one of the big items from this transportation bill is the provisions that allows communities to apply directly to federal grants through USDOT, the Department of Energy, other sources. And this is just an example of some of the ones that are open right now. And we will go through a couple of these here in a minute. Won't hit all of these because some of them may not be as directly related to transportation demand management planning, but did want you to be aware of these. The first one is this bridge investment program, which is absolutely going to be critical around the nation. It's a large program, $2.3 billion. And one of the good things about this bridge program is that we can incorporate elements that can help support bicycle pedestrian travel as bridges are replaced, complete streets. So we think this is going to be absolutely a great program over time. And some of the upcoming deadlines for this, for planning type studies, it's already passed. It was July 25th. But for bridge projects, there's still time to get those in by September the 8th to get in applications for those. Back to where I was. Want to discuss also the Reconnecting Communities pilot program. I think this is one of the programs that we've discussed very heavily with stakeholders because we are very excited about it. The short story on the program is that it provides funding resources for communities to ultimately overcome barriers that were in place from the construction of roads, railroads, and such. And we have several projects in Metro Atlanta that are exploring using these funds for things such as like the Stitch and other areas. So going to be a great program. One item that as it relates to schedule, this is one that also has got a clock ticking on it. We got a little bit of time to get in applications, but ultimately it's October the 13th. So we think that's going to be another good program that communities are also going to be paying very close attention to. And one thing I should note is that there are planning funds. A lot of communities are still, they may know they've got an issue, but they may not know the best way to solve it. So there are planning funds available to help support those efforts as well. Another item that syncs well with the Livable Centers Initiative planning is this Thriving Communities program that's still in the other early phases of being developed, but there is actually solicitation out right now for services to help communities really take advantage of the federal programs that are available. So more to come on this program, but it's definitely one we're keeping our eyes on. Now, an item that is important to share that even though it's not directly related to a notice of funding opportunity, I think this is very important. It's a rulemaking that I think directly impacts transportation demand management planning, is that the federal government is proposing a process where we establish greenhouse gas targets for states and major regions around the nation. And this is ultimately, it has been proposed before, it was repealed, but now it's as of the middle of last month, they've gone through a new rulemaking where they're taking comments on the rule around the country. But we've anticipated that this rule was going to happen really over the past 5 years or so. And ultimately, what we have to do collectively around the country is we need to set declining CO2 targets from a 2021 baseline over time. And this would be, if this does go through the federal approval process, this would be a new requirement on regions and states around the country. So this is an item I think we felt like we knew was eventually going to come. But what does this mean really is that we'll have to increasingly consider climate change as part of really all the programs that we have around the nation, because we'll be needing to work towards achieving targets. Those were some updates Roz wanted to provide this morning. But David, anything you would want to add to that? I was going to bring up the website.
No, I think you covered everything pretty well. Maybe I can chime
David,
in and bring
anything
up
you
the
want to
website.
add?
John, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. No, I think you did a good job going through everything. If you do bring up the website, maybe I can chime in there a little bit.
Okay. David, you want to kick it off?
I can't see the website, John.
Oh, all right. Let me just.
Share.
Okay. Is that first of all, like if you go to atlantaregional.org and then go /IIJA, we do have this website that David and a lot of the team have worked very hard on, where you can go in and absolutely, if you've got an area of interest around like transportation, climate, environment and such, you can click on these boxes and then ultimately it'll take you to this page where you can go in and see like some of the various specific programs and that's in the bill from the IIJA. But what a lot of people have been really, we've directed people to is going to be towards the bottom of this page for the funding opportunity resource database. And then also below that, you can see we're keeping track of some of the NOFOs that are being released. So a lot of work went into that hopefully will make your work and trying to identify programs a little bit easier. And then there's a pretty thorough resource database on the website. And David, anything you want to say on this?
Yeah, sure. I can kind of explain what this is, and I apologize for not being in the room. If I knew that we were going to do the demo, I would be there in person and it would be a little easier. But John, I think I can kind of guide you through this if you want to click on anything. But really what this is, it's an electronic searchable version of the IIJA, which is a $1.2 trillion spending bill that was authorized, signed into law in November of last year. It comprises over 400 distinct federal programs spread across about a dozen different federal departments and agencies. So this is much more than just transportation. This also includes energy and broadband and climate change, water resources. There's a lot of elements to the database and the law. So what this is a way for you to kind of focus your area of inquiry on, specifically what is of interest. So you can kind of filter out, those areas that aren't within your particular agency's realm. So the first thing that we did in this database was filter out a lot of the programs that really have no relevance to the Atlanta region. So you see 235 results. There are originally about 408 there, but we have filtered out those that are geared towards like marine estuary restoration programs or Bureau of Land Management, strip mine reclamation for sites out west, things like that, that we really don't deal with here in the Atlanta region. And then you can filter even further. And maybe, John, you can just kind of follow along. There's three ways that you can filter. The first is by those four main funding buckets. So if you click on that, if you're interested particularly in transportation, so that takes the 235 down to 109. And then if you're interested in discretionary programs that you can, or we call it competitive here, where you're applying to DC for those NOFOs that John went through, you can look just at those programs as opposed to some of the programmatic funding that automatically comes to states and regions. So now we're down to 70. And then, for example, in the last filter box, if you are, say, for example, a city and you want to know which programs you're particularly eligible for, you can do that. And I see that the monitor in the room, oh, there it is. So John, if you can click on city under eligible recipients as an example. So now we're down to 43 results. So that makes it a lot easier to kind of look through what's actually out there right now. And then you see information on those 43 programs. I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but that column to the left is the name of the program. If you click on that, it'll take you to kind of a general information page. And I would say don't, no, okay. Yeah, it'll take you to just some general information. If it happens to be a NOFO that's open, and maybe John, you can scroll down. I saw one that says apply now. So there's that all stations accessibility program. If you were to click on the apply now button, that will take you directly to the NOFO site. So you can download the application, read through all the detailed eligibility requirements, deadlines, things like that. And then going back to the database just for a second. So one thing that you can look at is those programs that may not be open just yet, but are pending. And we're trying to the best that we can to identify sort of the target dates for when we expect a NOFO to be made available. A lot of these are still to be determined. They're going to be new programs. But some of these, maybe if you scroll a little bit further down, John, maybe one that'll say like third quarter 2022 or fourth quarter 2022. I don't know one in particular to click on as an example, but that's fine. So we're doing our best to stay on top of these NOFOs so that you don't have to. We know there's a lot of information out there. It's hard to subscribe to all these email blasts that come out from the various agencies. So we're trying to consolidate that as best we can and put it all in this database so it's in one place. So you can see what's open now and go to the application website, and you can also browse around and see what's coming up. So that way you can start getting ideas about what you may want to go after a few months down the road. So I'll end there.
Yeah, and Roz, thank you for letting us come and share a little bit of information today. If anyone has questions, of course, feel free to reach out to David or myself. Well, we do have on the presentation our contact info that I'm sure we'll have on the website. And Roz, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions now or later.
Okay, thank you, John. We have any questions for John or David? Anyone have any questions? Just unmute yourself, or you could type in the chat box as well. Happy to field any questions you might have. Okay, well, thank you so much, John. And of course,
I had a question.
yes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there's any plans possibly to do the same thing for the Inflation Reduction Act, or I know the Infrastructure Act was huge, so there's a lot going on, but I was just curious.
I think that, of course, Gil, this will have some transportation-related climate programs in it, the Inflation Reduction Act. So yes, we do realize we're going to need to get our arms around this. And it's a very complicated bill as well. So that it will take a little bit of time. I think we know the headlines around it, but the specifics are, we're going to have to better understand how this complements the IIJA.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
We're extremely appreciative to John and David for this information. Of course, the link to the site is there. And if you have any questions, John and David's emails are up here. And if any of our stakeholders here, you're eyeballing something and you have some questions, just feel free to reach out to us. And we'll try to support you as best we can. And if we don't have the answer, we certainly have the experts in the room, and we could all put our heads together if you're eyeballing something in particular. So I also want to mention, as was stated, our work into the future, and I'm about to, this takes us into this is a really good segue into the TDM plan update, because all of the things that we've just heard regarding a number of things in the IIJA, as you all have seen, there are a lot of things that are relating to TDM, to congestion mitigation, air quality, and even the presentation that Mike did. All of this collides for us in our work and how we serve the region. So I'm really proud now to present to you our TDM plan update. You all have been in the weeds with us. You've been on this journey with us. We are over halfway into the work for the TDM plan. I want to commend the great team. Sabrina has been the project manager, ICF, Kimley Horn, Urban Trans, and Fairpoint Planning, and I may have left one or two off, but there have been a host of consultants that have been doing a tremendous job on this work, and we could not be more proud of where we are at this point. We are still, as I mentioned, we're only a little over halfway, about 60% into the plan, but Sabrina's going to come and provide you with an update in terms of where we are and what we have coming up. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, we will be doing a focus group with each of the transit providers here in the region. So we're excited. We interviewed Marta on last week, and we will be doing the focus group today with Gwinnett County, Cobb County, and the ATL. So there's a lot of pace going here. We see we are moving really fast. We're moving quickly to get the project done. Our end date is about end of February. And we know that this plan has to go through a number of processes. And so once we are at a good point with the plan, it will go through John, TAQC, and then John pushes it up to TCC. And then from there, it actually will push up to the ARC board for final approval. So we have a lot of work to do, but we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm really excited about where we're heading. So Sabrina, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll get the screen set up for you.
Thank you, Roz. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be in person today, but we are happy to be able to have this great technology to be able to do these hybrid meetings. As Roz stated, I'm very happy to provide a brief update on the TDM plan project and share an overview of our approach to the equity analysis that is currently underway. So Roz's words were perfect. I think she used the word collide, because all of this that we've heard today does collide with, what we're currently looking to do for the planning process, and, our future steps as we, analyze our strategies and move forward with developing that TDM plan. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. So with your guidance and collaboration, we've made great strides in the effort to update the TDM plan. As you know, again, the TDMCC is considered our steering committee, and so we rely heavily and lean into your advisements and your comments as we present these various stages of the work we're doing. As Roz mentioned, we are over halfway done, but we are really in those critical stages now as we look to develop strategy and hone in on the strategies that we'll pursue in the TDM plan. Just to give a little brief overview of what we've done and where we've been able to complete our first round of public and stakeholder engagement, where we've led a series of focus groups, small group discussions, received public input by survey, and successfully, with your inputs, has finalized our 6 goal statements. Subsequent interviews with partnering employer service organizations, or ESOs, and then also select employers and partners have informed strategy development. And we used the June TDMCC workshop with you to vet and refine the strategy list. Thank you again to those who were able to participate in that and join us in Peachtree Corners for that session. Our next efforts will include prioritization of those strategies, which will then lead into development of an updated regional service delivery model. It's important to note that we do not expect the core nature of our current partnerships to change, the way we partner with ESOs throughout the region and other partners. But as we've previously discussed, what's rising to the top in this discussion are the opportunities to engage other non-traditional strategic partners to a higher extent in our work. So this slide highlights the 6 goal statements that have been approved. I hope that you are all at this point familiar with these by now, but just to briefly review them, with goal 1, we are hoping to meet an ever-growing and more diverse range of social and economic mobility needs. As we said, it collides with what was presented by Mark Carnathan earlier. With goal 2, we want to more intently focus on the full spectrum of commuting needs related to workforce development and job training. With goal 3, we're hoping to implement strategies that will increase our ability to meet first and last mile connection needs. And then with goal 4, we're aiming to be more flexible in how we approach specific needs of the region's employers across the various geographic areas within our region. With goal 5, we are addressing the desire to better integrate our communications with a range of partners with the hope of expanding our reach and maximizing our marketing opportunities. And then goal 6 spans across all of these areas as we aim to leverage and diversify funding sources to help support our services and programs to take us to that next level of service provision, which again will to a large extent involve analyzing, IIJA, what that offers, as well as other funding opportunities at the local, state, regional, or even national level. As a reminder, these are high-level representations of the what of the plan, and then the strategy development prioritization process will help us delve into the how. I am making sure that I'm syncing right here. Thank you. And that how will consist of existing strategies applied in the region, which have been documented in the regional TDM inventory report. Those are all of our existing ways that we partner and deliver services, TDM services throughout the region. And then we're also incorporating those new strategies that we've identified through these various planning efforts and are continuing to identify. As Roz mentioned, we have another focus group where we're finally able to pull together key transit organizations and really discuss what transit's goals are as they relate to TDM strategy and how we can support each other to a higher extent. Next slide. Thank you. I just now realized that Andrew's up there helping me with these slides. Thank you, Andrew. So the entire planning process has been built around ensuring an equitable approach, beginning from who is at the table providing input to the technical review of our strategies, expanding to how we've tailored our communications and implementation of planning recommendations across the region. We're now conducting a dedicated equity analysis to evaluate the baseline TDM services and the proposed strategies and the impact they may have on diverse populations across the 20-county region. To do this, we're pulling in demographic, socioeconomic, and employment data, as well as data related to the built environment, health outcomes, and climate vulnerability to ensure that the final priority strategy set supports equitable outcomes. Next slide, please. So the equity analysis will use mapping and data analysis to compare how populations are being served by the existing TDM program, again, which is our baseline operations, alongside the new populations and communities that the proposed strategies could target to enhance equity. We're framing this analysis through a set of pain points that have been identified in the stakeholder discussions. Again, we were really intentional about bringing together, diverse groups and different non-traditional stakeholders, but those who maybe we haven't been as intentional at engaging in the past. And so, out of these conversations, we've gathered a lot of input and have identified some particular pain points. And these are shown in the box on the right. Those may include language barriers, lack of flexible commute options, overwhelming transportation costs for the population, as well as needs for ADA accessibility, for instance. And so we'll be taking these pain points and trying to present them through a set of what we are referring to as personas, whose characteristics are grounded in the regional data. The personas and their pain points will help to bring equity analysis to life for us as well as for the public. We hope to provide a narrative to our strategy recommendations, a narrative that reflects the daily lived experiences of the populations throughout the region and those that we're looking to serve through our services. Next slide, please. And this slide outlines our strategy review process for the equity analysis. First, we'll define those regional characteristics and data sets that we'll use to assess the equitable distribution of our TDM services. Second, we'll compile them and map the data. The animation on the right looks pretty similar to some of the maps we've seen Mike present, because we are going to be taking different data sets and really analyzing these different data sets that we have access to show, how this relates to, the TDM services, our reach, our current reach, and our predicted future reach through the strategies that we're looking to present in the plan. So for example, 0% of zero car households or transit routes by agency, as well as the ARC's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Index. That's also referred to as CEDS. So we're using all of this data to build the personas that we're trying to present. For example, we could develop a persona for a traveler that's in an area with high level of zero car ownership, right? And has also been identified as a vulnerable census tract and outside of the regional transit service area. That's a specific persona of a commuter in a hard-hit area, one that's been hard hit economically by the pandemic, someone who has no car and is unable to access a workforce development program using transit. That's a real person. And what we're trying to do is present real people and present how our services will help the needs of these real people throughout the region. Third, we'll compare this data to the current distribution of our programs and strategies, including, who our employer partners are currently, who our property manager partners are, where they're distributed, and also, all of our registered commuters through the Agile My GCO app, where everyone's distributed, and just kind of analyze that alongside this economic and socioeconomic data. Finally, we'll assess how our new proposed strategies will enhance equity compared to the baseline program. So we're looking at, these different aspects of equity. We're looking at where our service provision currently reaches, and then we're looking at, what these new strategies may do for enhancing, access to our services when compared to our baseline services. That was a lot, but hopefully you were able to follow those steps. Next slide, please. These are some particular discussion points that I don't think we'll have a chance to really get into today, but I'm going to connect with Roz and see how we may present these questions to you all, maybe in a brief survey sent by email, where we can get your input as we continue along the lines of this equity analysis, because we do want to, get some input from you, particularly with regards to, making sure that we're take into account all the different population groups as we build out these personas, and also geographical areas, and how we may best implement our strategies and the strategies that have been proposed. And so we want to definitely get your input into this process. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of data analysis, but at this stage, we're at a key point of getting your input to how we may best analyze this data as we consider the different needs across the region, as well as these different personas. And then the next slide will just show our next steps here. In October, we're looking forward to hosting that third TDMCC workshop, where we'll review the TDM strategies, our equity analysis findings, and the proposed service delivery framework. The goal will be to receive your feedback on these items as we move into the second round of stakeholder outreach, where we'll present the draft plan and ensure key strategies align with public concerns. And then within our fourth and final workshop with you, we'll receive your feedback on the implementation plan, as well as the communications and distribution strategy to help us finalize documentation. So we're getting there, and with your help, we'll get there in a way that's as inclusive as possible. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Hello, this is Gil Grzycki from the Georgia EPD. I had one comment. I found interesting how transportation demand management is being used to provide an ability to match those in disadvantaged areas to the resources they need. So the transportation resources, that being transit or last first mile. And so my only comment on that is that you can tie that in with environment in terms of the environmental benefits by assuring that whatever transportation resources that are access to those at lower income or anywhere is that take advantage of the IIJA and this Inflation Reduction Act and all that, and ensure the continued efforts that MARTA has done for low and no emission vehicles, and the only alternatives toward that end. So you can combine the benefits of reducing exposure of low income communities to pollution and providing them access to give them the opportunity, I guess, for that economic mobility that might be worked out.
That's an excellent point, Gil, and that's exactly what we're looking at. This is an area, transportation demand management, if it hasn't been in the past, it definitely is now, an area where all of these different areas, as Roz, again, using Roz's word, collide, and how they intersect. We can't leave out any one part of that conversation because they're all intersecting and integrated. We were joking internally about how it seems like everyone in our space is using the word intersection and intersecting. And so a lot of these conferences are talking about the intersectionality of all of these different areas and how they relate to creating quality of life and helping the region thrive. And so we will be looking at climate, again, we will be looking at like climate vulnerability across the region and how, some of these strategies relate to those areas that are more vulnerable from a climate perspective, and an environmental perspective. So thank you. Thank you for that input. Any other questions or comments?
Hey, Sabrina, this is Dan Horgan at Midtown Alliance.
Hey.
I have a question just about, traditionally our program is kind of focused on commute trips and employer outreach. How does this plan, given the fact that, more and more people are working from home and the majority of trips are non-commute trips, how does this plan address non-commute trips more than it has, if it does?
So that's a great question. And I think you'll see that come out more as we review the strategies that have been proposed, because some of those strategies do relate to non-commute trips, and how we can integrate our services to service the needs of those who have needs to just get around from the perspective of buying groceries or getting to healthcare appointments. We've heard a lot of that in specifically in our focus groups with community organizations and talking about the populations they serve and the mobility needs they have. So as we present the strategies, you will see some of that within the strategies. And the key there is, diversification of funding as well. We've traditionally, as a TDM program, been funded for the commute needs. But, as we're able to look at what IIJA offers and other funding sources offer, to be able to diversify our funding, we'll be able to envision how we can further address those non-commute needs as well. Roz, did you have anything to add to that?
No, well said, well said. And I will say, as an open invitation in October, Sabrina mentioned it. The next thing that we have coming up is our strategy session. And so we're going to be asking all of you to join us. That will be our TDMCC meeting. However, we will be asking for a lot more of your time that day. It'll be very difficult to dive into strategy and hear from all of you in an hour and a half. And so we will be sending out, you'll be getting some correspondence from Sabrina and the consulting team fairly soon on the date and the location. More along, I will say quasi-retreat, but really having some set aside time where we can be comfortable and really strategize around this very thought and comment here. Look forward to seeing everyone. Sabrina, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Any additional questions for Sabrina before we wrap up, give our announcements? And of course, she's available if you want to shoot her an email, answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Thank you all.
And I will, without further ado, I'll just go over our announcements and give you an idea of what we have. I mentioned our next session, actually our next TDM meeting will be our strategy session for the TDM plan update. And we're just asking all of you that can join us. We will get a date to you very soon and we'll be able to, we're pinning down the location for that. Want to do something a little more relaxed so that it'll feel like a mini retreat and spending time together to really think through some of these things that we talked about today. And the other announcement that I have for you is that ACT is coming to Atlanta. We have the ACT TDM Forum. It will be in Atlanta, November 15th and 16th. If Amber, if you could pop that into the chat box, there's a link if you're interested and want to register. Will be 2 days of focusing on TDM work, policy at the national level. Our policy professionals will be here. We're asking, now we're working on the agenda. It's going to be some great speakers. One of the keynotes you all heard at our regional TDM forum just recently, Ryan Gravel will be talking about the great work that they've done with the Beltline. And we will have some folks from FTA, Federal Highway. ACT has already tapped to be presenting there as well. So it's going to be a great, great forum. We are sort of acting as the host, and we would love for you to be a part of it. There is a registration cost, and that information is in the link there. And just want to make sure I didn't leave anything off here. Looks like we're good to go. One last thing I do want to mention, we will be putting out an RFP for the GCO program end of October. So we are looking forward to that. The team is working now. We're pedaling fairly fast to have that ready. And we're excited about the future of TDM in this region, as well as across the country. And so look to see that sometime late October. Any questions for us as we wrap up today? Any thoughts? Did we miss anything? All right. Well, thank you all for your attendance today. I look forward to seeing everyone in October for an extended meeting as we work on our strategy. And then we look forward to delivering that to start sharing that with John's groups, TAQC, TCC, and then onward to the ARC board. Thank you for your time, and you all have a wonderful rest of the week. And stay safe and stay healthy.